Hey, welcome back. Today's video is going to be on networking. We're actually going to do a series of videos on some things that you can do with your computer networked at home if you've got multiple computers. So the very first step is choosing whether or not to be on a domain or a workgroup. And most of the time you're probably going to choose a workgroup. And this video is going to explain what the differences are and how you would choose them. So like most videos, we're going to start with the start button. So I can either click start or use the start key, and then go to computer, right click, and then go to properties. Now this pulls up your basic information about your computer. Now the part that we are interested in are the change settings under computer name, domain, and workgroup settings. So here you'll see my computer's name is Turbine, and I am in a workgroup because this computer I use primarily at home. And you click on the change settings tag, and this brings up a dialog where you can change your computer's name and you can change whether or not it is on a workgroup or a domain. And what you do is you use this little change button right here, and then you'll choose domain or workgroup. And so you see mine is set up as a workgroup. Now the difference between a domain and a workgroup is essentially whether or not you have a central server that you're logging into. Now I don't have a separate server set up at my home to log my machine into, whereas in most workplaces you might have a situation like that where you're logging into a domain. And so some of the advantages of using a workgroup are that it's small, it's not complicated, it's easy to set up. You can join a workgroup of just one computer. If you have multiple computers, then they can also join that workgroup as well, but there's no centralized login server. So it makes it nice and simple. The disadvantage of a workgroup is that you have to set up accounts on each computer. So if you have two computers and you have an account on one named John, then the account on the other one is also going to have to be named John, and if you change a password on one, you would also have to change it on the other as well. So there's just a little bit more upkeep. So that means your passwords can become out of sync. It doesn't scale real well if you're going to have a lot of computers, so keep it small. So workgroup is for something nice and small. Domains are for lots and lots of machines. If you're using file sharing, you can only share up to 10 simultaneous connections. Again, for a small home network, not that big of a deal. Now for a domain, if you were to use something like this would be something like redmond.corp.microsoft.com. That's the name of the domain at Microsoft, but you'd have to be on that network to actually join it. In this case, this would require a reboot, but you're actually logging into a domain server. So when you punch in your credentials, when you log in, you're actually talking to a server that is authenticating you and saying, oh, okay, I know who you are, and then it lets you log on to that computer. The advantage of that is that you can go log on to the domain network from any given computer that's on that network. So it's much more robust, but it's certainly much more complicated. The primary advantage is that you have a single server that keeps context for all of your user accounts. The primary disadvantage is that you have to have a separate server and you've got a lot more complex setup. So for a home account, probably stick with a work group. For a work account, if you're going to do some really complex network setup, you can try and use a domain, which also requires a domain server, which we're not going to get into today. So I hope this has illustrated the differences between domains and workgroups for you, and wait around for part 2 and we'll cover some more cool things that you can do networking your machines at home.